Hello and welcome to a brand new Arseblog Arscast right here on arseblog.com. How are you? Hope you're well. Thank you very much indeed, as always, for being here. We are recording the morning after Arsenal's 2-0 defeat away to Newcastle in the Carabao Cup semi-final, second leg, giving Newcastle a 4-0 aggregate win over the two legs, and they go into the final waiting to see who it is they're going to face. The second semi-final, second leg takes place tonight at Anfield, Liverpool, taking on Spurs, who have a 1-0 lead from the first leg going into that game. So it's been a week which makes you reflect a little bit, doesn't it, on football and how it works. You go from the high of beating Manchester City 5-1 on Sunday. What a game, what a performance. And then this. And it's not always easy to explain, although I think obviously you can look across these two games and highlight certain moments, certain individuals, the squad that we have or the players that we didn't have, and look at those to try and understand why it is we didn't perform the way we know that Arsenal can perform. And particularly this season against Newcastle, we've really struggled and we haven't been able to deal with their game plan. It's 3 games against Newcastle, 3 defeats against Newcastle. The second last game of the season this year is against Newcastle. Our final home game of the season is against Newcastle. That could be a big one. I really hope it's a big one, and it's one we're going to have to do better in, obviously, after what's happened against Newcastle and Eddie Howe this season so far. So why don't we try and unpack what happened last night at St. James's Park and what happened over the two legs. The chance was there for us to go to a Wembley final. Whatever you might think of the League Cup, personally, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed that we didn't make it, because it's a trophy and we cannot be snobby about trophies. We can have priorities, by all means. I think that's perfectly normal. You should want to win the Premier League and the Champions League more than you want to win the League Cup. I think that's perfectly normal. I don't really get with the complete dismissal of the League Cup as a trophy, as something that we can just turn our noses up at, because if we're in a final against whoever it is, whether it's Liverpool or Spurs, if we win that, everybody's having a fucking great time. And those are the moments as football fans that are so few and far between that you cannot afford to be in any way snobby about them. So I have to say I'm disappointed. It's not the end of the world. Been around the block a few times. I'm not going to cry into my cornflakes this morning, but I do think there are lessons to be learned from these two semi-finals that going forward we have to address. So let's kick on with the show. And with me to talk about it all is Phil Costa. Good morning, Phil.
Morning, Andrew. How are we doing?
Okay. So some cold light of day irritation at what happened over the two legs, I have to say. And we might talk about that in the context of the League Cup, the Carabao Cup, in isolation, I should say, in a couple of moments' time. But let's start with last night's game. 2-0 down from the first leg. It's not ideal. Far from it. But it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you can turn that over. It's, we've seen 2-0 leads overturned in games. So you've got a whole 90 minutes to overturn this 2-0 lead. It didn't work out that way. Let's start with team selection. Mikel Arteta picked the exact same team that started against Manchester City. On the one hand, you could say, hey, that makes some sense. They played really well. They won the game. It was 5-1. They're confident. Why change anything? On the other hand, I always felt like Newcastle were going to be super energetic going into this game. Really up for it. We saw the crowd was up for it, of course. I just wondered if maybe a couple of pairs of fresh legs might have been useful.
Potentially. I mean, hindsight is always 20/20, as we know, but it was the last game before our Dubai break, our famous Dubai break. So I understood putting out an unchanged side, and maybe the thinking or the logic behind that was you could just leave everything on the pitch, knowing that you've got 10 days off, or not as intense as they normally would be with a normal schedule. I have to be honest, when I saw Eddie Howe moving to a back five, I thought, is he trying to Pep Galaxy brain this? But speaking of changes, his ones absolutely worked in the context of the game. They were subtle, but they worked. And I'm not sure there were any obvious ones from our side. Maybe Ethan Nwaneri could have come in. Potentially Calafiori could have come in. I mean, those were the main the main points of debate, I would say. But in the grand scheme of things, or the overall context of the game, I don't know if they would have made a huge difference on the night, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, we'll never know. We'll never know, obviously. I think a fast start and an energetic start from Newcastle was always going to be on the cards, right? We all figured they were going to try and come out and use the atmosphere and use the intensity of that to get themselves off to a good start. And they so very, very nearly did that, with Alexander Isak smashing the ball into the back of the net. I mean, perhaps in the cold light of day, the fact that it's offside, you don't think too much about what he did with that chance. But boy, did he apply a finish to that moment, just offside. It took quite a lengthy VAR check for that goal to be ruled out. When I saw it in real time, I was like, well, it could go either way. You just don't know. Gabriel maybe could have stepped up another half a step and made it a bit more obvious, but one that we got away with in the very short term last night.
Oh, we absolutely got away with that one. I mean, it would have been a disaster to concede after 3 minutes, especially when we knew that more or less the first goal in this game would be so vital. But he was doing that all game in the first leg as well. He was just sort of walking around, staying idle between both centre-backs, and then as soon as Newcastle got in possession, all of a sudden he'd either pull out to the left or pull out to the right off the back of a centre-back. And you could see his movement. It was so simple, but so effective. He just ran straight off the back of Gabriel. Lewis-Skelly was pushed forward slightly as well, so that there was that whole space in the channel. And they're in party mode. The ground's up. The players are up for it. And you just think, oh, Jesus Christ, this is going to be a long 87 minutes because you come in with a game plan, you come in with some renewed hope. They've lost their last 2 games at home, and you think, really, that's the best that we could do? Thankfully, we got away with it. But yeah, just the overall piece of striker play is immaculate. The finish is immaculate. And you saw again what having someone like that in your team can just emit to not only yourselves as a team, but the opposition as well, because we looked scared. We looked absolutely scared of him the whole game. We looked scared of him in the first leg. And, I don't want to make it an Isak thing because I think that narrative has been bumbling on for a while now, but he's just hitting levels this season that we unfortunately are quite far away from, as most people are. It's not just Arsenal, it's most teams with it.
No, it's true, but it does leave you sort of wistful, doesn't it, about like, and look, I don't want to make this about, I don't want to be dismissive or critical of Kai Havertz in any way, because I think that guy is doing his best for us. He's being asked to run for 90 minutes game after game after game. And, I think he's a very honest, a very diligent, a very hard-working guy. But you can see that there is a difference between him as a striker and Alexander Isak as a striker. And that's, I think that's obvious, right? Isak is one of the best strikers in the world right now. He has developed into that. The talent and the potential was there during his time at Real Sociedad. And that, I think, will be the regret for Arsenal, that the opportunity was there back then to do something. I don't necessarily think it's there now. But you can understand why every time you hear or read a report about Arsenal and transfers and the summer and, what we want to do in the market, you can completely understand why every single one of those reports says Alexander Isak is a player high on Mikel Arteta's list. Like, he'd be high on every single team's list, I think, at this moment in time. And I suppose when you're trying to assess a striker or assess his impact and his quality, you also have to assess how he performs against the players he's playing against. William Saliba and Gabriel are potentially the best central defensive partnership in the world. And I think you could make a very good argument for that. There is a huge difference, isn't there, between what they had to deal with on Sunday with Erling Haaland, who is an incredible goal scorer and an incredible finisher, versus Alexander Isak, who is also a very good finisher at this moment in time, who takes his chances early, and we'll talk about the goal now in a second, but who plays in a way that is designed to cause stress to central defenders. I don't think I've ever seen William Saliba look as mortal in this game. It was like, is it Superman 2 where Superman, gives up his powers? It was like that.
Idea.
I think it was. But that film's way before your time. I shouldn't even be asking. I'm sorry about that. But I think it is. He gives up his powers and he's just plain old Clark Kent. That was William Saliba versus Alexander Isak last night. He was just Clark Kent.
Missing his cape. I mean, it wasn't a good night for either of our centre-backs, really. They struggled to deal with Isak in the first game, as we said, struggled to deal with him again last night. But I thought Saliba in particular was uncharacteristically sloppy. He didn't know whether quite to stay or go with Isak, and I think he got done for the first goal. But again, there was another example of him misjudging the flight of the ball, which got him booked after he pulled back Anthony Gordon. There was that moment where he almost gifted Gordon that second goal in the second half with a poor back pass. Just a level of uncertainty that we're not used to seeing with him.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put that down to Isak and Isak alone, but just the way he can occupy and drain a central defensive partnership is quite incredible. I mean, he can go left, he can go right. There is a real intention to his movement and the way he can run in behind. He can hold up the ball. That's a complete striker. And like you said, this is nothing to do with Kai Havertz, who is doing an incredible job. I think, honestly, what we're asking him to do is unfair. And what we continue to ask of him is unfair. But the levels were on show tonight. And I was going to say this point a bit later on, but some very simple analysis of this game can be that across both legs, the XG was Newcastle 3.34 and Arsenal 4.79. They scored 4 goals, we scored 0. So you can have the best defence in the world, but most of the time your forwards win your football matches, and they have, unfortunately, one of the best up front.
Yeah.
So yeah, not an easy one. And I just think, excuse the choice of wording, but this sport has a real habit of humbling you. So, hard one to take.
Yeah, I mean, we'll come to the overall analysis of the two legs in a second, but let's sort of crack on with last night. Mikel Arteta spoke afterwards about missing chances and opportunities. There's something similar in the first leg and the second leg. Martinelli goes through on goal, hits the post. It's easy to say that's a chance that Isak or Gordon score. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But, chances are the way they finish their opportunities over the course of these two legs, they score that chance. I think it was a couple of minutes later, maybe 5 or 6 minutes later after Martinelli hit the post. Then Newcastle went up the other end and scored the goal in the first leg, the Isak goal. In this game, we had a similar situation where I think we reacted actually quite well to that bright start from Newcastle, where they did put us under pressure. We did look a little jittery. Obviously got away with the VAR decision on the offside goal, but we started to play. And Martin Odegaard started to drop into spaces and started to sort of calm it down and create a bit of pressure and a bit of dominance in the Newcastle half. Then there's a moment where the ball breaks for him in the box, swipes at it with his right foot, it hits the outside of the post, brushes the outside of the post. I think he should score there. I know it's on his wrong foot, but I do think, given the position he was in and the way that the ball sat up for him, it makes it easier on your wrong foot when the ball sits up like that. Fine margins, of course. But then, within 60 seconds, Newcastle put the ball forward. Saliba loses the duel with Isak. Gordon plays the ball in behind. Again, it's so impressive the way he drives on, but takes the shot so early. Raya's beaten. The ball rebounds into the path of Jacob Murphy, and his shot goes in off the inside of the post. And those are the really fine margins. I think if I'm being super, super critical about this goal, I'd like to see Gabriel just drop when Isak is going through. I'd like to see him drop in behind his goalkeeper. He's sort of caught ball watching a little bit, and by the time he reacts, Murphy is there to apply the finish on the rebound.
Yeah, you could say that as well. And I think Saliba in particular looks in control of that duel initially. It's just a simple goal kick, and he actually gets in front of Isak, but then Isak finds a leg from somewhere to pinch it around the corner. And I think Gordon is a little bit fortunate here as well, because I don't think he was looking for Isak with that return ball. But Isak just controls it so effortlessly on his thigh, right into his path. The shot is unbelievable. I mean, to take that shot from there and so early with your weaker foot, and to get that kind of contact on the ball is a bit ridiculous. I mean, I know it hits the post and goes straight to Jacob Murphy. That's a goal that if you concede on FIFA, you say, that doesn't happen in real life. Their striker is just in the box and it goes right to him. But it did. Yeah. And in that moment, they got the rub of the green. Odegaard's, bounces off the post and out. Their one bounces in off the post. It's just, those are the margins. And I think Arsenal in particular this season have operated a little bit too much on those margins, whether it's 1-0 defeats or, one chance that we overanalyze after the game because it was our only chance to score, for example. And that's been a theme of our season so far, is that we really focus and die by those fine margins, or live by them as well. So just the speed at which the game turned felt like a real blow, because we were close to making that game on, and then in an instant it was game over. Yeah. And from that point forward, I just wanted the ground to swallow all of us up and say, right, 3-0, can we just shake hands and leave this one here? But we were kind of put through that last hour or so, or maybe more, 70 minutes, which just felt a bit like us going through the motions, really. Unfortunate, but, that's what happened.
Yeah, there is a wider discussion maybe to be had about the games that we haven't won this season, and it's kind of reductive to say, well, we lost all these games without scoring a goal. Bournemouth, okay, down to 10 men. We didn't score a goal in that game. Newcastle, away from home, didn't manage to score a goal. Inter away from home, didn't manage to score a goal. Those 2 1-0 defeats. And then 2-0 defeats to Newcastle, and we'll come back to what maybe we could and couldn't do over the course of these games. But first half, look, you can go a goal behind. It made it very difficult. How do you react? Do you really put pressure on the opposition? I think that goal sapped a lot of the energy out of the Arsenal legs, to be honest, because we didn't really make any chances after that. We really did not threaten the Newcastle goal. I know he had some corners, which, to their credit, they defended very well. And Dubravka played to a level I didn't really think he was capable of playing. I thought he would be perhaps a bit of a weak link in there under the set piece deliveries. But he did very well. And then there's a problem about half an hour in, isn't it, when Martinelli goes down holding his hamstring. We've just come out of the January transfer window, and we didn't buy anyone, and then a player goes down with an injury, and it feels fairly typical.
Yeah, was this the most inevitable or predictable incident of the night? After we failed or chose not to bring anybody in during the transfer window, the January window. I mean, the club briefed their pieces about not finding the right options and wanting to keep their powder dry for the summer, which I could understand. We've spoken about that earlier this week on the 30, but that gamble looked quite costly already when Martinelli went down holding his hamstring after, half an hour. For me, January wasn't just about bringing somebody in for the sake of it. I think we needed a lift, an injection of quality, but also the guys needed help. Yeah. Havertz needs help. Martinelli needs help. And they're playing high-intensity games every weekend after a horrible January schedule, which was just bound to end up with somebody breaking down. I didn't expect it to happen 2 days after the close of the window, but it's just been the story of our season that everything that could possibly go against us feels like it is. And I don't know how serious it looked. I don't think it was Saka level. This has come off the bone kind of thing. But if that's 3 weeks, I mean, it's far from ideal again. And to be honest, I thought Ethan did a good job when he came on. He was direct. He was getting to the byline. He put a few crosses into the box. But we're short. We were already short, and now we're even more short. So it felt so typical that in the context of not only the night, but the January window and our overall season, that he goes down with that injury, and just another moment, to deal with.
Where do you stand on the contention that maybe the smallness of the squad plays into a performance like last night after a big win against Man City. And that was a big win that obviously cost us physically. That we lack the kind of depth, on the bench to really change a game when it's not going our way. And this is the third time that we've lost against Newcastle this season. They have, obviously got a way of playing against us that we find very difficult to deal with, and we don't have the options on the bench to try and change things. So it's 11 games in 34 days for Arsenal, which is quite a lot of football. That, I think, is part of why I'm with you on what the January transfer window was about. It's about, at least bringing somebody in who could give a bit of freshness, who could, just help us out in certain games. Even yesterday, right? When it goes to 4-0, aggregate, quite early in the second half, having an option to just sort of put on up front, so Kai Havertz doesn't have to play another 90 minutes, would have been, I know it's not the biggest deal in the entire world, but it would be something, right? It would help protect that guy a little bit, or it's things like that where I think you're trying to micromanage your players and micromanage your season. It was game over at 4-0. Newcastle knew it was won. We knew it was lost, and everybody had to go through the motions of another half an hour, 35 minutes with injury time. We just don't have the options. We don't have the depth on the bench, not only to change the game, but to maybe longer to medium term, if you're looking at what's coming up this season, to sort of protect the players a little bit physically as well.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, the lack of options on the bench has been an issue all season, whether it's down to injuries, suspensions, illness, whatever it's been. We have been short. And I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. Mikel Arteta said it about 5 times in January that we're short. He said it at the start of the season that we've got one of the thinnest squads in the league. But it's all well and good saying it, but when it's put into practice, you look a bit silly. So we're just really squeezing the last drops out of everybody, it feels like. And like I said, it was Martinelli yesterday, but it could have been anybody. Could have been Havertz, could have been Rice, could have been Yuri and Timber that went down with an injury. And to be honest, none of that would have surprised me. I just think we've been running on empty for so long. And it's why when the draw was made, I was absolutely dreading this Newcastle tie, because for some reason, they always find an extra gear or an extra level against us, and they are just the most difficult team to play against. I mean, tactically, they used the extra centre-back really well, whether that was Fabian Schär or Big Dan Burn. They used that spare player to step up on our spare man, which denied us any chance to overload them in attacking areas. And I think, we saw it was Fabian Schär creeping up on Rice for the second goal. I mean, why is a centre-back there? It just shows you the freedom that he had to kind of press that player. I mean, the hospital pass from Raya is another thing, but it shows you that their extra defender was never really a defender. And they just went man-to-man across the pitch. They pressed really well, and we couldn't play through them. While that surprised me, the rest, their physicality, their running power, how they were finding that extra 5 or 10% in duels, didn't. Because they always bring their Sunday best for Arsenal, and every single person in that stadium was desperate to win that game. So that's why I was dreading this tie, because I knew that in our condition, with our options, 2 legs against Newcastle would have been an absolute disaster. And they ended up proving to be that.
Yeah, sometimes a team becomes a bit of a bogey team for you. I think Arteta was asked about that in his pre-game press conference. Watched the Premier League last weekend, and Newcastle went ahead 1-0 through Jacob Murphy and ended up losing 2-1 to a Fulham side who caused them more problems in that second half than we did, certainly over the course of the second leg anyway. So it's not as if Newcastle are a perfect team or I know we have our problems with them, but those are our problems, not necessarily everybody else's problems. And they might be very good at reading what it is that we're going to do, and maybe that issue is about our own variety or versatility and what we do when we attack and when we have the ball. But look, let's quickly just go through the second half. I guess at halftime the message would be, look, try and get an early goal. You never know what might happen. It's not impossible. It's really, really difficult, but not impossible. But it becomes impossible when you continue to make stupid errors and stupid mistakes. And I think we did that. William Saliba, you already mentioned, made the wrong decision, just trying to nick the ball away. David Raya is a long way out of his goal. Anthony Gordon curls a shot wide, not too far wide, but, Raya was obviously beaten, and that's a completely uncharacteristic mistake from Saliba. And then I don't really quite know what's in Raya's head here. I mean, listen, I like David Raya a lot. I think he's been a very, very good player for us this season. I know he is asked to play in a specific way. Do you need to stand there doing that ball shuffle thing, waiting for the opposition to engage when you're 3-0 down? We're not 3-0 up here. We need to move the ball quickly. We need to distribute the ball quickly. What we don't want to do is wait for them to get completely set, get into position to execute their game plan. As you said, tactically, it's to push up one of their centre halves on our spare man, who at that point happened to be Declan Rice, and then play a completely fucking terrible hospital pass to Rice. He gets tackled in the box. The ball falls for Anthony Gordon, and it's the fucking simplest goal he'll ever score in his life. And that's our fault.
Yeah, that pass was never, ever on. Ever. And he did something similar against Spurs. Was it last season when we were 3-0 up?
Yeah.
He made a mistake where he gave it straight to Christian Romero. So he has one of those in his locker every now and again. I think it's inevitable the way we ask him to play, but it was one of those goals that in the context of this game, you just kind of laugh about, because you think a lot of other things can be explained. We can go through the tactics. We can go through how Newcastle reduced our ability to create overloads. We can talk about them using the extra centre half to press up. What you can't explain is David Raya doing that.
No.
And sometimes you just have to say that was a mistake. It was very stupid. Rice never wanted that ball. The ball was never on. There was an easy pass out wide to Saliba, and for some reason his brain just went or fell out. I don't know. That was the only reason I could get behind it. And yeah, that was the last thing we needed. Another mistake, gifting them a goal. By that point, it was the 52nd minute, 53rd minute, maybe even earlier, to be honest. I've lost track of the timeline from last night, but it was so avoidable. Yeah. But it almost just put the final nail in this coffin and said, look, the last half an hour of this game is going to be an absolute joke. It was the longest second half I think I've watched this season. Yeah. Every time I looked at the clock, it didn't seem to be going anywhere.
No, I agree. It was just like, can we just, there should be maybe a rule in football where you can just sort of do the fucking throw in the towel, just like
the forfeit match option. Yeah.
Nobody needs this. Newcastle don't need it. Arsenal don't need it. But you've got to play the 90 minutes. But I was looking at it going, I don't even care about a consolation goal at this point, because that was game over. All I wanted was for our players to come through without any more injury, without any physical problem, because it's a long time to play a dead game, and it can get frustrating. I think we did see there was a measure of frustration among some of the players. Declan Rice got himself a booking. He could have been Gordon out off the ball, and then he went lunging in on Bruno. One of those where
that was a risky one. Yeah, I was thinking, oh God, he's gone, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, it was completely uncharacteristic from him. But it's one of those where you're looking at, Havertz is on a yellow card, Saliba's on a yellow card. Newcastle have people like Trippier and Bruno, Guimaraes, Chouard. They're wind-up merchants. You saw it last night. Trippier trying to wind up Gabriel. He was picking on Myles Lewis-Skelly, and Rice came over and told him to fuck off. But, you can get frustrated when you're playing a dead game. And I was thinking, just nobody do anything stupid. You don't need a hamstring strain. You don't need a red card. You don't want to get involved in any ructions with Newcastle players who are trying to wind you up. I think for the most part, we obviously avoided those things, but it just doesn't make for particularly fun watching, does it?
It was a terrible day. If you imagined how badly this game could have gone, I don't think that would have been beyond our wildest imagination. We were comfortably beaten on the night. We were outplayed. They were more physical than us. I think Arteta was probably outcoached by Eddie Howe. We picked up an injury. It couldn't have been much worse. Kai played another 90 minutes. And this was a really difficult one to take. And I think we're going to have to do that. But everybody was waiting for us to lose this one. They had their jokes ready. The social media admins had their posts scheduled. People were doing Haaland celebrations outside of pubs. Jesus. You know, that's where we are currently in the Arsenal discourse. Everybody was waiting for us yesterday to lose that game. And I think some people can compartmentalize defeats like that in the Carabao Cup, and power to them. But I'd be lying if I said I'm not disappointed. And more than anything, it was just the manner of the defeat. More than the defeat itself. I think we missed some good chances in not even just in this game, across both legs. But Newcastle do seem to have our number a little bit. And I just hate giving teams their big day out. And I think we're an excellent team, but we have a habit of doing that sometimes. And, we did it twice in January with Newcastle at the Emirates, United at the Emirates, and now Newcastle have had their party game again. We've lost 4 of our last 5 games against Newcastle now across all competitions. Another blank last night means it's 3 consecutive games without scoring against them this season. And it's 3 consecutive blanks against them at St. James's Park. So that's not pretty reading. They seem to have figured out how to play against us. And as I said, after the high of Sunday, where we were all on cloud 9, academy products scoring 5 against City, it's just, football giveth and football taketh away,
Yeah, it is. It's the highs and lows of football. And that's the way it goes. That is certainly the way it goes. And I think, when we look at the 2 legs, I don't think Arsenal can have too many regrets about last night, in the sense that they can regret the performance, they can regret the goals we conceded, they can regret the outcome, but I don't think in terms of performance we deserved to get anything from that game. The first leg is the one where it was lost for me, where, look, Newcastle had the quality to score their chances and we didn't have the quality to score their chances. I know you gave the XG totals. I would imagine that a large part of that combined XG total comes from the first leg, because I think that is the game where we missed the opportunity to just react to the goals that Newcastle scored. We could have gone ahead. I remember a Timber header from just under the crossbar. He put it over. The Martinelli one that hit the post, obviously. There were probably a couple more. There was the Kai Havertz header, of course, where you're looking for him to score there. And I know he was just back off his sick bed and all the rest. So I think that first leg in particular is the one where we need to look at it as the game that really cost us the tie, because a game like last night can happen. You can't legislate for it, but it can happen. But when you're playing catch up from a game that you shouldn't have lost 2-0, then you run the risk of paying the price, and that's what we did.
That killed the tie. To be honest, that game killed the tie, and I didn't have much in the way of expectation or hope that we could turn things around. Losing any 2-legged game, 2-0 at home in the first leg, will make things difficult. It's quite simple. And, we know that we've struggled at St. James's Park in the recent past. I wasn't holding out much hope, and I completely agree. If we were going to win this tie at all, we had to make more of that home leg, and we just didn't. And it was a moment where we were really struggling. Our inefficiency in front of goal was under the microscope. We had some big misses across that game and the United one shortly after as well. So there were vibes of January from last year as well. We had that run as well where we lost, was it against Fulham? And then we lost against Liverpool in the FA Cup. So I don't know. Look, sometimes these can happen, these little runs of form, but I completely agree. It was lost in the first leg. And there's always a chance. If Odegaard scores that goal, then maybe things are different. But overall, I can't really complain or say that we were unfortunate to lose or it was unfair by any means, because I can't honestly sit here and say that it was. So we were just bested, and one that we'll need to take on the chin. But hopefully one that we can quickly put behind us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are lessons to be learned. And look, I think when we talk about what Arsenal didn't do from an attacking perspective, I think we have to acknowledge that for this game we didn't have Bukayo Saka and we didn't have Gabriel Jesus, and that leaves us short. We did have Gabriel Jesus for the first game. You look at the bench and you see a collection of left-sided defenders, and I know that is to some extent a consequence of the injuries and how they've hit us. But for a game like last night, if you've got the squad built in the right way, two of those players should be attacking players, or at least attack-minded players. And all we have to bring off the bench is Ethan Nwaneri, who comes on in the first half, obviously, for Martinelli, and then Raheem Sterling. I don't really know what more to say about him. It's he just doesn't really have any attacking impact anymore. Good guy, seems very popular among the squad, but he's got 4 yellow cards this season and 1 goal. And that kind of sums up what's going on there. And yeah, it's a tough one because as well, I think you look at the atmosphere in that ground last night, and Newcastle fans were 110% up for this game. I'm not saying the Arsenal fans weren't in the previous game, but they're 110% up for it. They're making a big noise. The team are energized. They're fired up because they've got a final to play for. Mm-hmm. They're now in the final of a competition which will, if they win it, bring them success and bring them a trophy. And I said this just at the start before we started talking in this. I understand prioritizing different competitions. I do not and cannot understand outright dismissal of a competition like the League Cup. Is it the least important of the 4 competitions? Yes. Does it make it not important? No. I think we've got to be up for every competition we can play for. You can't say Arteta and Arsenal need to win trophies and then when we lose a semi-final, just say, it's only the League Cup. Who cares? Well, I care. I'm not saying you have to care. If that's the way you feel about it, that's the way you feel about it, and that's fine. If it's a coping mechanism or whatever it might be, fine. You do you. Me, and you've said it, I'm disappointed and frustrated that we were in the semi-final of a competition and we lost. And we don't get to have the final. We don't get to have the Wembley day out. We don't get to have the anticipation and the excitement. And if we win that final, the sort of joy of winning a trophy and winning a final, which we haven't had since 2020. And even back then, we didn't get to do it properly because it was in the height of the pandemic and there was nobody in Wembley and people couldn't go to the pubs and they couldn't share in it in the way that you do when you win a trophy. So for me, I'm quite disappointed and quite frustrated that over the course of these 2 legs, we were found wanting so badly.
Yeah, I am as well. I think you're completely right to highlight that. And I think there is an element of copium, maybe, in terms of how the Carabao Cup can be easily dismissed if we don't get what we want in the competition. We're in a semi-final. That is a win that I want. I want to go to Wembley. I want to play in a final. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we should underestimate the effect of silverware and what it could bring this group and this manager, because I think this was Pep Guardiola's first trophy, the League Cup. I think it was Jurgen Klopp's first trophy, the League Cup. And you have to start somewhere. You need to get that winning taste and that feeling and that mentality from somewhere. And we have been slightly dismissive of this tournament as a fan base, I think, because we've had, Premier League titles in our sights. We've obviously wanted to go somewhere in Europe. And I completely understand all that and agree with it as well. But at some point we need to win something and make sure that this group is not just the nearly group. We want them to at least have something to show for their talent and efforts. Yeah. So I'm with you. This was a really disappointing game for me, a disappointing result. And like I said, I just hate being the the team that gives other teams their big day out, and Newcastle certainly got theirs yesterday.
Yeah, it remains to be seen, obviously, who they're going to play in the final. The other semi-final, second leg, takes place tonight. Liverpool looking to overturn a 1-0 defeat to Spurs. Yeah, you would fancy them to go and do that, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. And for Arsenal, there's now a break. There's now this sort of fabled trip to Dubai, which I think, while I can see the benefits of it, we're perhaps in danger of over-indexing a little bit, you know. Go get the vitamin D. Go just relax. Genuinely, like, go and relax a little bit and be together and, you know, look at this second half of the season, if you want to call it that, you know, blank slate, turn over the page. Let's put all that behind us. Let's decompress. Let's recharge the batteries. I can see all that to an extent, but it is tinged with the disappointment of knowing that the reason we have this break is because we're not in the FA Cup, because we were beaten by Manchester United in a game we shouldn't have lost, in a competition that we should be looking to win. So I think that has to be in the background of whatever the positive aspects of a trip to Dubai are, and you know, bringing everybody together. I don't know if they're going with their families. I hope they are, and I assume they are, and it's good for everybody. And we'll see the benefits of that when we come back. But they also have to take stock and understand why it is that they have this time off.
Yeah, agreed. Again, agreed. I mean, it's time that we could use valuably. I think it gives people a chance to rest a bit. It gives us a chance to look at things maybe differently in a tactical way. We can recover, get those niggles sorted, any injuries as well. I think the wider conversation, or actually, can I ask you about Martin Odegaard?
Sure. First,
because he needs some sleep. He needs some sunshine and maybe a double cheeseburger. 3 of them. Because I think it's been such a stop-start season for him. And he struggled again last night, not just because of the missed chance, even though I think he was okay in the first half. But his performance levels generally haven't been as consistent as we would have liked this season, or become accustomed to with him. And this could be down to a multitude of things, but I can't look beyond how thin he looks.
You know, it's very funny. I've had 3 people this morning ask me about that, or talk to me about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it's noticeable, obviously. My gut feeling is that this is just him being completely shredded as a professional athlete, and that maybe part of the rehab from his ankle injury is reducing the load on that joint as much as possible, therefore losing weight and making yourself as light as possible so you're not stressing out ligaments and things like that. But I think it's noticeable how thin he is. And it could be lack of sleep. It could be, you know, like I said, just being completely shredded as a 0% body fat professional athlete. But I do look at him sometimes, and you look at some of the before pictures and the after pictures. Do you watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. I mean, if I said to you, Rickety Cricket.
I mean, like you said, the before and afters, he's so thin in like the facial area. He looks gaunt.
I think they're doing him dirty a little bit, because they're doing 22-year-old Martin Odegaard, where he's still just got a little bit of puppy fat and what have you, versus now where he is so thin. But look, I don't think it's unreasonable to be a little bit worried that he hasn't been 100% since that ankle injury that he picked up. And look, he's come back since then. He's basically played every minute of every game. He got taken off last night because we were able to take him off last night, whereas we couldn't take off Kai Havertz because we didn't have somebody else to put on. So at least there was that ability. But, you know, he's come back, played every minute of every game. He's been good at times, average at times. Has he hit the heights, or has he reached the kind of form that we know he can reach? No, he hasn't. You know, the mischance in the game last night, you know, confident, fully firing Martin Odegaard puts that in the back of the net, I think, even with his right foot. So, yeah, I understand the conversations around him.
I mean, is it as simple as getting away for a bit? I mean, they say a change is as good as a rest, and I hope so. But if we have any intention of catching Liverpool or doing anything in Europe, we need a fit and firing Martin Odegaard.
For sure.
It's quite simple, really. And, you know, he came back from the injury in November. I think there was that honeymoon phase where he put 3 or 4 good performances together. But since then, he hasn't really been able to lead this Arsenal team consistently enough. And I think we're suffering for that. Obviously, there's more to it. He's missing his mate as well. Bukayo Saka, I mean, those two are just so important to how we play when we're at our best, especially how they link and combine so effortlessly. But maybe he's just feeling the effects of, you know, being rushed back slightly, playing a lot of football, becoming a father as well, which will have an effect on his sleeping and all that stuff. So who knows? But I just thought it was really stark to see him recently and how kind of just drained he looks.
No, but isn't the wider point that we, because of the way the squad has been built and what we have available to us right now, again, acknowledging that there are some injuries, that we place a very heavy burden on individuals to produce on a consistent basis without necessarily having the alternatives or options that when they don't, we have something else to turn to. So we don't really have anyone else to do what Martin Odegaard does in this team. You can point to Ethan Nwaneri, but he's needed elsewhere in the absence of Bukayo Saka. And you could say the same thing of Kai Havertz. Like any player, there are going to be games where it doesn't work for him, where he doesn't perform, where he doesn't produce. And I think we kind of know now and understand what we can get from Kai Havertz. There's a lot of it is very good. Some of it is not where exactly you would want it to be, but what else is there? Who else do we have? And I think that is a wider discussion for me, is about, we have these very talented players, and I think Odegaard on his day is you know, a superb player, a brilliant creator, somebody who can dictate the rhythm of the game and who can make chances for a team which has the right attacking pieces. But if he doesn't perform, or if he can't perform on the day, we don't have any other option other than to sort of, well, keep going and see if you can fashion something. Keep going until the 96th minute. Keep making those runs. Keep trying to find those passes for players who aren't in the positions that we need them to be. You know, it is a bit, to some extent, like asking him to, you know, demolish a brick wall with his own head. You know, it's gonna.
Don't do that.
Don't do that, Martin. Yeah. We need you. We need you not to do that. All right. Well, look. Let's hope that the break from football, and for us, by the way, I think there's a very important point to make here, is that we get a break from Gary Neville, because I've been saturated by Gary Neville on commentary over the last number of weeks. Saw it last night when the game was being previewed on Sky. There he is with his microphone. When the Alexander Isak goal that was disallowed went in, he did his like thing, which fucking
and
drives
for the
me
Rice
mad.
Tackle as well. You know,
fucking horrible little weasel noises from Gary Neville. So I think we could all do with a little bit of a break from that. To sort of finish us off, though, I want to move to something else, and to something that is maybe a serious discussion to be had about the reaction, let's say, to Myles Lewis-Skelly and Myles Lewis-Skelly's celebration in the game against Manchester City. It sparked a lot of debate. I want to play you a little clip. Now, I know this is TalkSport. I know it is Jason Cundy. I know this is a guy who is essentially shameless because he's on TalkSport. He's there to drive whatever interactions it is that they drive. But this is him talking about the Lewis-Skelly celebration on Sunday.
I'm not convinced it's the wisest thing to do because, so long, there's plenty of years to come.
Yeah.
You wait. We saw what Roy Keane did to Haaland's dad. There's just be careful.
Just be careful. Yeah, you 18-year-old, you be careful because somebody might do or inflict upon you an act of violence like Roy Keane inflicted upon Alfie Haaland. This, by the way, is Jason Cundy when Declan Rice didn't celebrate scoring a goal for England against the Republic of Ireland.
Celebrate your goal, Declan. You got to celebrate your goal. You've been booed the whole time in that first half. You managed to score. Celebrate. Rub their noses in it. Exactly what Grealish did.
Strange difference there, isn't there?
Are you saying there could be double standards, Andrew, in the English football media?
Crazy, isn't it? Just crazy to consider.
A novel idea.
It's a situation I think that needs to be highlighted, at least, right? Because there's another story out there, and this story came out in the wake of the Lewis-Skelly celebration. So we heard from a guy called Tony Scholes, who is the Premier League's chief football officer, who has said, let me get the quote up here, he said, there's a balance. We all like to see celebrations. Some of the celebrations have been very funny, entertaining, but there's a line. Once it crosses over into mockery or criticism, we would need to deal with it. Now, what is the straw that broke the camel's back here? What is that particular straw? Is it Iliman Ndiaye flapping his arms like a seagull? They didn't seem to come out and make a big deal of it then. The ridiculousness, by the way, of a guy being booked for flapping his arms is just fucking beyond the pale. Tony Scholes, by the way, not to sort of delve into conspiracies or anything like that, spent 17 years at Stoke City. A club that has a bit of history with Arsenal. So a young Arsenal player scores a goal, has a celebration, and all of a sudden we're having these conversations about whether celebrations are distasteful or whether they have gone too far. You know, Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher, they found it a little bit disrespectful when Myles Lewis-Skelly did what he did, but they didn't find it disrespectful when Erling Haaland threw the ball at the back of Gabriel's head when Man City equalised. So these double standards that are perpetuated across the media, they might seem fairly benign. They might on their own just come across as sort of, well, you know, this is a guy with a certain standing in the game or with a, you know, and it's like, it goes a bit beyond that for me.
Well, these takes, whether we like it or not, from Sky Sports or whoever's on TalkSport or all these people, they seep into the subconscious, right? So whether we like it or not, these opinions are having an effect on the wider footballing community. And what I really can't stand is how everyone talks about how the game's gone and wanting things how they were 20 years ago, and how we don't have personalities in football anymore, and how everyone's a robot who's playing pet ball and, you know, all of this stuff. And then all of a sudden, someone shows a bit of personality, the wrong person, I will say, and all this pearl clutching comes out. And it's like, this is what you want. This is what I want. This is what a lot of people want, is some needle, some jeopardy, some rivalry. One day you give, another you take. We're going to have to take last night on the chin, but we enjoyed Sunday. And then all of a sudden, it's distasteful for Gabriel to be doing this. What has Lewis-Skelly achieved to be mocking Haaland? You're just proving his point. Well, it's like they don't even try to hide it at this point. And what really irks me is there are compilations on Sky Sports YouTube channel about Jamie Vardy's best celebrations, his most iconic celebrations. And we love it when Neil Maupay is doing funny stuff, don't we? And when Jack Grealish is drunk as hell at City's trophy celebrations, and he's become the nation's cheeky chappy. No issues there. But when Pogba wants to do a little dance in the corner, or Myles Lewis-Skelly wants to celebrate some way or somehow, you know, we're seeing the narrative again come out about Rashford. Look, I'm not going to say anything, but there's a link between these situations and these players, you know, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous, the furor that seems to have come about with this Lewis-Skelly stuff. I think there is definitely an Arsenal angle to it as well, where people just frankly don't like Arsenal and see Arsenal as an easy target. And I'm really glad that he's got a sensible network and family around him, because not only did it start with the celebration, but it started with the red card as well.
Yeah.
Because he was called a villain in the Daily Mirror by their chief sports writer. Alan McAnally as well said that he needed to be careful because you can take a fall in football. Just, this is an 18-year-old kid who's just scored against Man City.
Yeah, and he's a villain.
I don't get it.
And you know what? You know what the funny thing is, if that's the right way to put it, right? Is this, I mean, the person I would say who is least bothered by what Myles Lewis-Skelly did is Erling Haaland. His dad might have gone off on one. His dad is obviously a fucking moron who, you know, puts stuff out on social media. But like Haaland strikes me, as much as you might dislike him, he's a guy who's happy to dish it out, and I don't think it'll bother him one bit what Lewis-Skelly did afterwards.
I think he liked it.
Yeah, he was at the end, like pointing at his badge, going, look, see that? That's the Premier League winner's badge. He wasn't going crazy about it. He knows that if you're going to be that guy on the pitch, from time to time, you're going to get it back. You know? So this idea that these guys somehow have to go to bat for Erling Haaland is just absolutely absurd. And you're right about the you know, there is that aspect of it where it's Myles Lewis-Skelly, it's Marcus Rashford, it's Paul Pogba, there are countless other examples. Raheem Sterling, of course, yeah. You know, well, there's a villain. He bought his mother a house. I mean, what a bastard. You know, this is the kind of stuff that the press have perpetuated, and it's happening again, you know, this time to Lewis-Skelly. You're right to say he's got a good network around him, a good agent, good people, you know, who'll keep his feet on the ground, who will, unfortunately, have to protect him from this kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But the wider point then about what are we policing here? What are we doing with football that Jamie Vardy can't point to his, like, Premier League title and Tottenham fans to their no Premier League title, and this is what? This is wrong? We want to eliminate this from the game? Why? What is the thinking beyond like completely sanitizing aspects of the game that everybody really in their heart enjoys? When you're on the wrong end of it, right? It's like, well, fuck that guy. Jamie Vardy does that to us and we're like, fuck Jamie Vardy. But when he does it to Tottenham, it's great. It always reminds me of that you know, football fans and their ability to be outraged by everything. I remember years ago, Leeds fans, you know, they were singing songs about David Beckham and Posh Spice and that particular song, you know, which if you're on the football pitch and you hear them singing that song about your wife, I think you're perfectly entitled at the end of the game to give them a little bit of a V sign, right? And they're singing that song, and then Beckham gives them the V sign, and they're like, oh my God, David Beckham, he gave us the V sign. Oh no.
Completely
you know, on their
like we should hold them to different standards.
Yeah.
Like they're not people.
Yeah, dish it out by all means, but don't fucking go to your fainting couch when you get a bit back, whether it's from a player, a manager, other fans, whatever it is. You know, it's just fucking pathetic. And I think the reaction to the Lewis-Skelly incident I despair sometimes that these attitudes are still prevalent in 2025. And I understand as well, by the way, that the world is not necessarily where we thought it was going to be in 2025 in terms of how people are treated and how people are viewed as equal or not equal or anything like that. But still, there's an 18-year-old kid who's probably going to get called up to the England squad. Mm-hmm. And he has a reputation, or if he has a reputation, I should say, it is entirely because of how what he has done has been presented by sections of the media, rather than him being, in inverted commas, guilty of anything that's worthy of criticism or opprobrium or anything else. And the reality is, if a player like Wayne Rooney did what Myles Lewis-Skelly did, it would be very different. They'd be talking about what a cheeky chappy, as you said. What a character, what a mentality, what a force of nature. Fuck them.
Yeah, agreed. I think there is a very deep or a deeper layer to this, which we've touched on, about it being the wrong people doing what people think is acceptable or not, but purely the celebration and the fallout over celebrations. You use the word sanitize, which is exactly what is happening to football now. They want to strip it of joy. They want to strip it of rivalry. They want to strip it of needle and personalities, which is the exact opposite thing we want. Yeah. We want that stuff in the game as long as it's lighthearted and funny and respectful. Sometimes it doesn't even need to be respectful, but it needs to be a story and entertainment as well. And I just despise that players are not being allowed to do this stuff, because what are we here for? Yeah. What are we doing? We want them to feel it like us. Well, and if we tell them they can't celebrate, then what are we doing here? Seriously? Are they just going to be like the 60s where they jump up and give each other a handshake? Yeah. I mean, the fact is, right, Myles Lewis-Skelly obviously thought about what he would do if he, in his debut season as a player, scored against the champions in our game against Manchester City. He thought about that. He thought about what way he would react. That is the kind of personality and character and mentality that should be commended rather than dragged down into the gutter by some of the comments that we've seen. Agreed. But it's entirely unsurprising. I think you don't have to look very far to see some of the double standards from the media in terms of who they target and when and why, how the headlines are written differently, what is acceptable for some people and what isn't, i.e. spending money. I mean, who doesn't dream of setting their family up for life? Who doesn't want their mum to stop working? Yeah. Who doesn't want to buy their mum a mansion? Or a nice car. Or a nice car. Or whatever. So fucking what? You earn the money. Go on holiday. Yeah. You know, it's just absurd. And I think there is a really nasty layer to a lot of what has been said. A, because of his Arsenal roots, and B, because of his appearance. So don't skip over it. Make sure it's highlighted. Make sure you call people out, because that is our duty to not only defend our own in Lewis-Skelly, but also to acknowledge the wider impact of what this is doing to people. Exactly. So. All right. Well, look, I don't think we need to say any more on that. We, of course, will not have a game this weekend. Maybe a time for us as podcasters to rest our vocal cords a little bit. But please. Yes. We need a bit of that. Phil, as ever. First world problem. Yeah, exactly. Very first world problem. All right, Phil, as ever, thanks a million. Pleasure. Thanks for having me, man. Thank you very much indeed to Phil. You can find him on Blue Sky. He is at philcosta.bsky.social, at philcosta.bsky.social. So there is an Arsenal-free weekend ahead, for better or for worse. Hopefully it is for the better, but obviously you'd rather be in the FA Cup. All we can do is take that trip to Dubai, make the most of it, come back stronger, come back better, and win games of football. So fingers crossed that is exactly what we see when we return to action next weekend. So in the meantime, I hope you, wherever you are in the world, whatever's going on, you're happy and healthy and safe and well, as much as that is possible in these strange times that we live in. I do want to thank you, as always, for listening, for being part of what it is we do here on Arseblog. It would be nothing without all of you. So thank you very much for making what it is that we do so meaningful to us, and hopefully to you as well. Enjoy the quiet weekend. We will have an Arscast extra for you on Monday, all the same. You can join myself and James for that. For now, though, folks, take it easy, and we will catch you on the next one. Until then, cheers. Bye-bye.